I'm not quite sure whether we're still in Russia or we've gone all the way to Athens.
You go to Moscow for work and St Petersburg for love.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Luke Jones The Other Way. We're here in glorious St Petersburg. This is the Paris of the North, the gateway to the Baltics. Now you've got two ways of getting here. You can fly in or you can take the fantastic Sapsan train up from Moscow. So we're here at the station, the aptly named Moskovsky Vokzal, which is the Moscow railway station, here in the heart of St Petersburg, a stone throw away from all the attractions. So we're going to be showing you around today some of the quirkier parts that you might not have seen on your travels. So just outside the train station, we have here Ploshchad Vostania. That's Uprising Square. They like a revolution up north here. They've had one or two. We're going to take things in a slightly calmer manner and kick off with a lovely cup of coffee over here in the Café du Nord. Now, the St. Petersburg metro is the second largest metro in Russia after, of course, the Moscow metro, but it's by far the deepest. Now, there's two reasons for that. First of all, St. Petersburg is actually built on a swamp, so they had to go down. And secondly, because a lot of the stations here doubled up as bomb shelters for during the Second World War. Now, let's go in and see how deep they really are.
Здрасте, 2 билета, пожалуйста.
Okay, 2 tickets, 55 rubles each. It's actually more expensive than the Moscow metro. Can't believe it. Maybe because it's deeper. They still use tokens here. Right, it's a long way down. And then we've got 6 stops on the red line down to Kirovsky Zavod. That's Kirov factory for our first stop of the day. Right, well that really is a long way down. That took about 5 minutes, or at least it felt like that. Anyway, let's get on the train. Well, 6 stops later, we've arrived at the station called Kirovsky Zavod. That's Kirov factory. Now, this red line was the first line that was built on the St. Petersburg metro, and obviously all of the metros in Russia are named after a certain Mr. Lenin, so there's a nice bust of him here just to commemorate that fact. Now, this station's absolutely beautiful, just like most of the ones in St. Petersburg. I really wouldn't want to have to judge which is the more beautiful of the two, the Moscow or the St. Petersburg metro. It would be a close call. So we've exited the metro here at Kirovsky Zavod, that's Kirov factory, on the outskirts of St. Petersburg. And I'm not quite sure whether we're still in Russia or we've gone all the way to Athens. Look at the architecture behind us. But it's not all about me in these films. I've got an old friend of mine here, Chris. Now, Chris has been living in Russia as long as I have, if not longer, and he's made St. Petersburg his home. Now, whereas I've always lived in Moscow, I'd like Chris to tell us a little bit more about when he first came here, why, and more importantly, why does he prefer St. Petersburg over Moscow?
Well, Luke, as you well know, being a Russian speaker as well, they have a saying in Russian that you go to Moscow for work and St. Petersburg for love. And I managed to do both things. I moved to Moscow in 2009 for work, and on my first business trip up here, I met my future wife. So St. Petersburg got its man in the end. I came here in 1987, I think it was. When I was still at school, I was in my first A-level year. I had 3 days in Leningrad, as this city was called then, and 3 days in Moscow. Of the two, I preferred this place because it had a German bar, which Moscow didn't have at that point, at least the one that I didn't find in 3 days. It's a city of contrasts. I live in this part of the world, which is the Kirov factory. It's not palaces and canals and fountains. But if you go into the center, then you've got some nice places to look at. The thing that always strikes me about St. Petersburg, when you're in the height of the summer and the white night, you think it's paradise on earth. Exactly 6 months later, you're in the black days and you think there's no way people can live here possibly. So it's a challenge.
But they do.
But they do.
And it's never dull.
No, 5 million of them do. They can't all be wrong.
Now, we might be in an industrial part of town, but the Soviets were still big into their culture. So behind me, you have the Palace of Culture in the name of Gaza. Now, Gaza, it turned out, in the Soviet Union, was not a famous football player, was actually a minor revolutionary figure. I've never heard of him personally, but here he is. And we've had a bit of a regeneration in this part of town. You've got a number of coffee shops and snack huts behind me, and you can even get a discount on a fur coat. So the Kirov factory metro station is perhaps not surprisingly named after the Kirov factory. And that factory in turn was named after Sergei Kirov, who was a communist eliminated by Stalin, allegedly of course, back in 1934. Now I'm going to bring Chris back in, who's going to tell us a little bit about the factory and what they make here.
The factory itself, as you can see, it's in fantastic condition now. It's not quite in its heyday at the moment. In the years of the Great Patriotic War, this was one of the main tank production facilities. Now they tend to make things like tractors. I think they make trams here as well. So anything that's big, heavy and made of metal, you can pretty much make it here.
And they still make them in here?
They still make them in here, hence all the broken windows from things being dropped.
It's a 20-minute walk from the Kirov factory to where we are now, in front of the statue of the big man himself. So, Chris, tell us a little bit more about Mr. Kirov.
As you can see, Sergei Mironovich is standing behind us. He was probably one of the top-level Bolsheviks in his time, and as we said before, I mean, Stalin obviously denied any possible involvement in the elimination of a powerful and popular rival. So there's no proof there. But yes, I mean, it came to be that the whole region that we're standing in, the region where I live, is named after the man. We celebrated 100 years last year. Yeah, I mean, he's now pointing towards our next port of call, I would guess.
Well, thanks for bringing us to this spot, Chris. Now, everybody knows that green's my favourite colour, but this particular monument looks rather like the Arc de Triomphe. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Well, yes, I mean, the resemblance is remarkable, isn't it? It is an Arc de Triomphe, a triumphal arc, a triumfalная arka if we're going to go into Russian. It was built, like many others, like the one in Moscow as well, to celebrate the victory of Kutuzov's troops over the Napoleon's Grand Army. They did wait until 1832 before they put this thing in place. They didn't want to have the risk of the French coming back and finding out that they'd already celebrated their victory over them.
So during Soviet times, the Lada wasn't the only car that was produced. There were several others. One of them here is the Zaporozhets, named after the town of Zaporozhye, where the factory where they're built is located. It was nicknamed by the Soviet citizens the Zaporozhets because of its unreliable nature. Now, as you can see, this is a slightly prettier one, and it's modelled, believe it or not, on a Porsche because the motor is in the back of the car and the boot is in the front. I'm sure you can see the resemblance. You often had to wait many years in line to get your hands on one of these, but I'm sure it was worth the wait. Well, we're here on the Neva, that's the main river that flows through St Petersburg, in the shipbuilding part of town. Chris, maybe you can tell us there's something significant about this boat here behind us.
Yes, this icebreaker called the Krassin was actually built on the banks of the Tyne in Newcastle. It's got an interesting history. It celebrated its centenary 4 years ago. It was built in 1916. It was built on the orders of the Imperial Russian Navy, and by the time, obviously, icebreakers take some time to build, so by the time it was ready, the revolution had happened and the Bolsheviks were the ones who took delivery. Now, the slight complication was that the Civil War happened shortly after that in the early 1920s. So what the Bolsheviks did to stop the Royal Navy coming in to places they didn't want them to come to, they actually scuppered this ship, 10,000 tons of it, on the mouth of the northern Dvina up near Archangel in sort of above the Arctic Circle. Once the war ended, the British came back because the Bolsheviks hadn't kept up with the payments on the ship. They lifted it off the seabed and took it back to England. At that time, the ship wasn't called the Krassin, it was called the Svyatogor. But the chap who was sent by Lenin to go and negotiate getting the ship back, his name was Krassin. So once he'd completed his negotiations, restructured the debt, as we would say, they decided, thanks very much, Mr. Krassin, we're going to name the ship after you. Today, it's a floating museum. The reason I brought you here, Luke, is because most people, when they come to St Petersburg, they only think about the Aurora. Very important ship, of course, the shot that was heard around the world. But very few people know about this one. And interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, both the Krassin and the Aurora, which is a bit further upriver, they were taken to Kronstadt to be restored. So actually, although this is a floating museum, it is actually a fully functioning ship, and I think I've seen from their website that they're looking to go on a few little trips later, perhaps next year, perhaps when this whole COVID thing is over.
So we visited the shipyard, and in keeping with the port theme, we thought the best way to end the night would be with a quick drink in the Liverpool pub. Okay, well, this is a great place to end the evening here in the Liverpool bar. And Chris isn't just a regular punter in here. Chris actually used to run the place. So, Chris, thank you for inviting us along to your local.
My pleasure. Welcome to my old local.
And it's been a fantastic day out. And obviously, Chris, thank you very much for showing us around some of the quirkier parts of St Petersburg.
It's been a pleasure.
A little bit off the beaten track, the ones that tourists don't normally go to. You get a few tourists coming into this pub, I guess.
Yes, of course. I mean, I as you said, I worked here for a couple of years, a few years ago, and back in the day, this used to be one of the main places where the big bands, visiting bands to Russia would come, because there was one of the only venues just up the road. So they would have the press conference before the concert and the after party after the concert here. So that table down there may still be some DNA from the Scorpions, maybe one of the Schenker brothers. So who knows? So I hope they've wiped it.
Follow the
since.
Moskva down to Gorky Park.
Absolutely.
That's
Winds of change.
That's what happens when you give a German an electric guitar. And actually, Chris is being shy and humble, but he used to play in the band here yourself, didn't you?
I did dabble a little bit. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I've witnessed it and it was fantastic. But anyway, once again, coming to the end of another edition of Luke Jones the Other Way. So make sure you like, share and subscribe, not necessarily in that order. And thanks very much and cheers.
Cheers. You're very good help.